So good morning. My name is Julie Nowak. I'm the LGBTQIA+ Initiative Coordinator for Bay Path Elder Services. I lead our outreach to older adults in the Rainbow community. We also create intergenerational conversations, events and programs, trainings, and our newest talk, Modern Pronouns, They is Correct, which came about because some of the folks at one of the councils on aging said their number one question was from grandparents. Oh, my grandchild has come out as non-binary. I'm not quite sure what that means, and I don't get the they thing. And I'm not sure how to ask or if I should ask. Okay, you can ask me. And Officer Sharon McQueen is the LGBTQIA+ liaison officer for the Worcester Police Department. And it's great to be teaming up with you again. So we are both here to help answer questions, and away we'll go. So, good morning, gentle thems. Welcome, friends.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. We always like to present information out there for the public, especially the older citizens of our community, to kind of feel like they're not struggling with some of the pronoun issues now we're seeing in our community. As we all know, language is a technology, and technology today is really advancing very quickly. So we always kind of try to keep informed and read a lot.
Yep. Yes, constantly reading. So one of the things that you can do with your language, and this is a big part of being welcoming and affirming, is just to open space with your language. Hello, friends, good morning. You know, I grew up, I was trained to say, ladies and gentlemen, and my younger friends at the colleges and high schools I work with said, you just left out a whole bunch of my friends and me. I said, oh, good point. So, you can open up your space with hi folks with an X. Yes, we're seeing that with some of the younger people. I like it a lot. If you remember your mathematics class, X was the possible. X opens up all that space. And here in Massachusetts, we have M, F, and X options for gender on our driver's license. And we're moving towards having it on all of our official documents. That's working its way through the process now. You can get a little more casual. I do hear them, hey guys and gals and non-binary pals. We'll get to what non-binary means. And yes, what's up, glitter kittens? They do say that at the college. Well, what's with that? Well, if you're letting this protected secret self out to explore, to thrive, to be curious, right? Maybe sometimes a little clumsy like a kitten. Glitter is what we will throw at you to highlight this beautiful you that we're just getting to meet. It's time to celebrate. I do like to start with a little current events. We would like to really thank Canada and France. They've just banned the discredited and harmful process of so-called conversion therapy. It does not work. And congratulations to Chile and Switzerland, who have just greenlit marriage equality. So that was our number one question that started this whole PowerPoint was, I don't get the they thing. Why do they use it? How do I use it? It's not new, although Merriam-Webster, as you see, made it the word of the year in 2019 used in the singular. We've seen it since the Middle Ages. We do it every day without realizing it. Someone's on the phone. Oh, do they have the thing we need? What do they want for that info? We have a singular they that can also be plural. But using the singular they, as Sam Smith does, that's the newer usage. That Sam identifies as non-binary, neither exclusively male nor female. They, them pronouns feel the best, the most authentic, the most accurate as they talk with others. And so yes, you will hear, if you've been listening about the new movies, a lot of the young thespians are using singular they pronouns. So they is starring in the upcoming blockbuster hit. That's a grammatically correct sentence now. I got to work for a little. It's a little bit of a stair climb for some of us older folks. We're all learning, and that's a good thing. Somebody asked me last time I did this, I hope you can see me like I see myself now. And they said, well, wait, if Sam is a they, why isn't Sam an us? Because Sam is one person. Okay. Feel free to ask questions at any time. Jump right in, even if it's just, wait, what? And you have a comment as well, please.
The thing is, with our older populations, I'm finding even people in their later 40s and all the way up, is they're thinking this is something new. That people have been always this super binary presentation of who they are. And when I did some research, I was doing a session with for the DAs, I got into the law a little bit. And we had anti-cross-dressing laws back in 1851. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, 1851, and I don't have my presentation with me right now, but the fine was outrageous. By today's dollars, you're talking hundreds, if not thousands of dollars if you were caught cross-dressing. And it was done to be, it must have been an issue if they made laws. It wasn't just one community, it was throughout the country starting in 1851. And some of these laws stayed in effect almost the mid-70s. Mm-hmm. So something to keep in mind. So this isn't something new. Our youth is more communicative. They learn technology faster. They're connected in a very fluid way. They share ideals and thoughts to people all across the world. And as we are seeing, that even very conservative communities are becoming to embrace LGBTQ people because they're realizing that these populations are no longer going to sit in the closet and hide.
Yeah, and we've always been here all around the world. And as Officer McQueen says, that these laws against cross-dressing were on the books into the 60s and some later. But if you are familiar with Stonewall, that's part of why people were arrested in the riots at the Stonewall Inn, which is what we commemorate every June in Pride Month, because they weren't wearing 3 articles of gender-appropriate clothing. So as we say, particularly now, the young people are so fluid on the keys, so fast making a word. If this word isn't right, I'll make a word that's right. If that word doesn't fit me by morning, I will make a new word and I can tell you why it's better and tell people all around the world. So labels are useful starting places, but as we all know, every one of us is a kaleidoscope. Someone said every person is an anthology, which I just love that statement. We're all our stories. You are seeing most often right now LGBTQIA+, because the intersex and asexual activists have been working really hard to be understood and better recognized and make changes recently. So we have expanded that commonly used acronym. If you've seen it all the way spelled out, it's something like 16 or 19 letters and a number, which is great. All of those identities are valid. We want everyone included, but it's a lot to say or type every time. So you'll hear me say the rainbow community, our beloved alphabet soup. Feel free to comment at any time if you would.
The thing is allow people to identify themselves.
Yes.
And if you have 2 ways of understanding what they say, listen to what they're saying. Because a lot of times they know that these thoughts are out of what we call the general population. So they're glad to usually share stuff to you. Just remember, anytime you ask a question, be respectful. Try to, you'll gauge the person by the way they're talking to you. A lot of times, if they have something that's really kind of on a newer onset, they'll tell you what they're talking about. And I use Google.
Yep.
I have to, because sometimes I get hit with something that I just don't know. And if I don't have time to talk to the person, I'll just Google it. It's amazing information you can find. Sometimes you get kind of a mixture depending on what definition you use. Just always be respectful of people and their identities as you would like them to be for you.
Well said. And when people tell you who they are, believe them. You can also, if you do have time to chat, you can ask, that word is new to me. I haven't heard that before. You say that again? Could you tell me a little bit more about what that word means and why it's so important to you, why it so accurately describes you, what does it mean to you? You can inquire. Often, especially younger people, will tell you more about these words. Speaking of words, So one big takeaway today, please. Sex and gender are two different things. Okay. I'm going to be painting with a very broad brush here, loosely speaking. So sex is like the hardware, the body, the systems. Okay? Gender, your sense of your gender between your ears, or I've had some of my late blooming trans ladies that I work with say, it's in your heart. I well believe them. So gender is your sense of yourself. Inside is male, female, neither, could be fluid, could be both. So it's like the software running on the hardware.
And keep in mind, we always think of sex as male and female. We cannot forget the population that considers themselves intersex. Mm-hmm. They are a population that can be a mixture depending on how they were born. So we don't always have the binary of male or female. Sometimes there's people who have a mixture of both biological sexes.
Exactly so. And here they are. So they are born with, as Sharon says, variations in sex characteristics that do not fit nicely or neatly in the traditional male-female binary. Sometimes that's obvious when the child is born, something external. Sometimes it doesn't become obvious until they hit puberty. And it's like, oh, you have those parts inside too, you're actually intersex. And some people go their whole lives without knowing it. There's a lot of variations within intersex. You can see that binary is already turned into a spectrum. A lot of us don't think we've ever met anyone who's intersex, but they're actually as common as natural redheads. The intersex activists have been doing a fabulous job in at least the last decade, working really hard to make people understand that they are who they are, they're as they are, and that's right. It used to be best practices. The doctor would look at the child, it was obviously intersex when they were born, and say, well, this one can be a boy, let's make that one a girl, and you'd raise them in that gender role. And for some people that worked, and for some people it was a living nightmare every day. So now I'm so happy to say, through the work of these activists, the best practice is to let the child be, unless there's an immediate need for some surgery, to save their life or something. Let them be, let them grow, let them find their words, let them tell us who they are, being their best authentic self. This is the newest version of the pride flag. If you didn't know it's changing, it's been through a few changes. They added first the brown and black stripes, bring people of color to the center and front of our attention, to the heart of our conversations, because unfortunately they're all too often marginalized both outside and within the rainbow community. The black stripe honors everyone who has been lost to AIDS. It also marks the strong activism of the PAUSE community, people who are HIV positive of all ages, who are working really hard to end the stigma and find a cure. We're getting so close. They're trialing a vaccine in humans soon. The next stripes that came in were the trans pride colors. Traditional, right? Or at least since the Victorian days, they flipped it around. Pink for girls, blue for boys, white because there's that space in the middle you could cross over, or you might be very comfortable somewhere in that white space. Again, trans folks can be all too often marginalized and or misunderstood both outside and within the rainbow community. So to bring those voices forward, those who want to speak, those who want to talk and bring their stories forward, it's so important for us all to listen and amplify those voices and for all of us to learn. And then our intersex friends, their color is yellow, right? Pink for girls, blue for boys. Yellow, and I saw a onesie in the hospital gift shop. It was yellow. It said, free to be me. I thought, wow, in the gift shop? And then the pink and blue, they've combined because they have elements of both male and female. Pink and blue together makes purple, a perfect circle, whole and complete as they are. Any comments on that?
The intersex community has challenges. I have met people who are intersexual over the years. Some have, because they do have variation of their biological makeup, they do sometimes have other comorbidities that they struggle with.
Yes.
And we always have to keep in mind, we always have to realize that these people have challenges. And we always, try to make sure that we try to make people comfortable.
Yeah. And as you were saying earlier, to listen for the pronouns that the person is using, listen for the words they're using as they're talking to you to describe themselves, echo that back to affirm and validate the person they're telling you they are.
And just keep in mind, if somebody asks, if you're asking them on a question, are you male or female, and they say both, don't always assume they're being sarcastic.
Mm-hmm.
They may be educating you as to what they really are.
Well said. So let's talk a little bit about some common terms for affirming language, because this will help us build towards the pronouns and a better understanding. So again, painting with a broad brush. Sexual orientation and gender are two different things. They're often confused or braided together or conflated, but they're two separate categories. Loosely speaking, sexual orientation is who you go to bed with, should you so choose, and all consent. And maybe that's nobody, and that's okay. Gender is who you go to bed as. So your sexual identity is how you think of yourself as a sexual being, whatever that might be. And maybe that's just your own personal business. Maybe you're dating someone or a few someones and you'd like to talk about it with them. Maybe you're an activist and you got it on your blog for the whole world. That's personal. But your sense of yourself as a sexual being. Let's start with our ace friends. Asexual folks, again, I paint with a broad brush, don't tend to experience sexual attraction. Some experience romantic attraction, sometimes to a particular person, and that may escalate to a sexual attraction, but very often it doesn't. And some don't experience romantic or sexual attraction. And the bottom line is they're not afraid, they're not confused, they're not wrong, and they're not interested.
And the other thing, always keep in mind that when a lot of people assume that somebody's asexual, they don't have an identity or a sexual orientation. That's not true. Some of these folks do. Some will identify as gay, straight. Just because they don't have a sexual attraction doesn't mean they aren't romantically involved in certain populations. Just always keep that in mind.
Nicely said. And to listen for other words they're using to communicate more dimensions, that kaleidoscope that we all are. They work very hard at Pride, the New England Aces, handing out their literature to explain, yes, we do belong here. We don't feel it the same way maybe all of you do, but we do belong here. We're valid. New England Aces are just a great bunch of people. Gay was a term coined, slang term, to refer to a man attracted romantically and or sexually to other men. You might hear it used for the gay community, often for gays and lesbians. I work with elders, so you will be meeting some older lesbians who say, oh, don't call me gay, please. I'm a lesbian. We've worked very hard to build community and hold my identity, so please respect that. Fine. That's what you do. Respect that. This will typically be what we call an owl. That's an older, wiser lesbian. I aspire to become one someday. You can change your labels. You can be a little uneasy with your labels. Andy Warhol was not always at ease being a gay icon. Went through different stages of that. You can claim your labels. You can change your labels. And labels can make a huge difference, and as we know, can save lives. Kate McKinnon remembers breaking into tears at the age of 12 watching Ellen DeGeneres come out on her TV show. Kate was thinking, oh, thank God I can be gay and still be on TV. And now she's got her own Emmys. But visibility and representation 100% improve lives and they save lives. Straight, a slang term you probably know, sort of the opposite of gay. Heterosexual folks, men attracted to women, women attracted to men. Bisexuals, we need a little extra love for the Bs, please. Not because they're greedy, but because that's just one of the many misunderstandings and myths that bisexuals endure, both outside and within the rainbow community. Let's take a look. So bisexuals are attracted to both males and females, not necessarily equally, not necessarily at the same time. And that's where some of the confusion comes in. Some people think a bisexual walks into a party and wants to date everybody in the room, which I would call wildly self-confident and deeply ambitious, but you do you. Most people dating one or a few people is plenty to juggle around the rest of our lives. Now they also get erased. There's erasure that happens. Let's watch it go. Let me tell you a little story about Jack and Diane. Jack and Diane are bisexual activists. They know who they are. They're very comfortable. They start dating. Well, the minute they get out on the street to go to the coffee shop, Jack and Diane are perceived socially as a straight couple. And so that's not quite perceiving either of them correctly, but unless they want to hold that identity consciously outright, they're a little misunderstood, and they're certainly erased. Well, it doesn't work out with Diane, but don't worry, they're still friends. She introduced Jack to Dwayne, and they started dating. Immediately, Jack and Dwayne are treated as a gay couple on the street, which is a very different social dynamic. So you can see how there's an effort by our bisexual friends to kind of hold their space and insist, yes, nothing has changed just because I'm dating someone else. There's a sense of, oh, well, you finally picked a team. Yeah, Team B. As the Kinsey report showed us in 1948, bisexuals are the most common and largest group in our rainbow family. So a little extra love for the Bs, please.
Right, and bisexual doesn't mean that you're uncommitted to a certain person.
Right.
And that's a bias that this community deals with. That they want, sometimes they're not always welcomed in the gay world, and sometimes they're always welcomed in the straight world. So they kind of feel like they're in their own community, and they do struggle. The other thing is, keep in mind, is pansexual. Mm-hmm. Pansexual is somebody who is attracted to the soul, the human being. They don't care about the mechanics of sex. They just really are focused on being with that person because they love who that human being is, their existence.
Yeah.
And sometimes people get a little confused with that, between that and bisexual. Bisexual have a tendency, either or. Pan have a tendency to even date gender fluid people a little bit more. They don't really care how they express, they just express they love the human being.
That's delightfully said. Yes. Some of our most famous Bs in the corner, Frida Kahlo, Marlon Brando, and Alice Walker. Sapphic is a term you might be seeing more recently online. I've seen it coming up in about the last half year or so. So we got lesbian, looking way back. Remember I said we've always been here all through time and history. Sappho, the Greek poet, way back on the island of Lesbos, wrote some poems to some other lovely ladies. Hence we get the word lesbian. Now we get sapphic, which is an umbrella term meant to welcome ladies who are interested in other ladies. So pansexual, omnisexual, bisexual, lesbian, women loving women, which is a term you'll hear in the African American community in particular. Just a more inviting and consciously inviting term. Your gender identity. Okay, to me, this is the sense of yourself. You got that first cup of coffee, your hair's sticking up funny. All right, how's this day gonna go, me? The person you see in your eyes when you look in the mirror, and that sense of yourself as male or female, maybe neither, in between, that's your gender identity. Okay, one more cup of coffee, gotta face the day. Here we go, let me get ready. How am I going to use my gender expression to communicate to others that I meet through my day with a kaleidoscope of gendered expectations that society has? How am I going to communicate through the day who I am and how I am? Am I going to put on makeup, a tie, a skirt, all of the above? How will you dress your hair? How will you use your hands when you talk? The bounce of your voice. There's a lot of ways to communicate your gender expression.
Gender expression, too, we have to always keep in mind that you can have two women on the spectrum. They're both female, but some will wear skirts and dresses, and some wouldn't be caught dead. They'll wear jeans and a leather top, and they'll ride a motorcycle. But that doesn't mean they're not expressing feminine ideas or thoughts. It's just in population, gender expression can vary depending on where they were raised. If there's somebody raised in the Midwest, they may have been raised on a farm, they may have had to do a lot of manly tasks, And they don't feel constricted that they have to wear makeup to be women, or they don't have to wear a dress to say I'm feminine. So we always have to keep that in mind. Do not apply your values to somebody's gender expression, because there's a wide spectrum of expression.
Just so. And you can see Prince used he, him pronouns. Then he was fighting with his record company and changed his name to a symbol, and you can see that he brought both male and female icons together. There's a song that expresses that as well. Just brought everything to the party, and that's what it's all about, being your best authentic self, to bring your best to the world and share it. So transgender, trans like transit or transition, to go across. Transgender is also an umbrella term. And it can be someone like Caitlyn Jenner, who by her own disclosure in her book has undergone a full transition, had gender confirmation surgery, sometimes called gender affirmation surgery. But there's room for so many people in this word. There's room for our non-binary friends. There's room for people who are gender fluid. There's room for gender variant, gender diverse, gender expansive. There's so much room. So when you see someone is trans, okay, now we know that. They're using the label about themselves. Listen for more cues to learn a little bit more about who they are. Would you like to take that one?
Trans people, you gotta understand, non-binary people don't not always think of themselves as trans.
Correct.
They don't consider themselves transitioning from one side to another. A lot of them feel like they are a mixture of both expressions. And however their validity floats is where they are, but they don't always consider themselves trans. So don't always make that assumption somebody who's trans is non-binary.
Yes. So that's trans, as we say, does not have to be from A to Z or Z to A. There's that whole alphabet in between where someone can be comfortable. And for some of them, it's going to move around. Somebody said it's more like a constellation, which I love. Cisgender is a term most people don't recognize on this slide. Cis is another Latin prefix on the same side as. And I usually see it in Cisalpine, this side of the Alps. But this is the only other time I see it. They created this word to sort of mean the opposite of transgender. So if you're cisgender, the sex you were assigned at birth and your gender identity align. And that's the key difference. Someone who is somewhere under the trans umbrella, that does not align somehow. Maybe it's a little bit, maybe it wavers, maybe it's a lot to the point where it's interfering with health and activities of daily living and mood, and it's causing depression and anxiety that becomes gender dysphoria. You probably know the word euphoria. Whee! Dysphoria is that opposite feeling. I had one high schooler say, oh, every time someone misgenders me through the day in the hallways, it's like one more rock in a backpack, and I kind of drag myself home. So again, another reason to listen carefully to the words the person's using. Some people will say cisgender or cis, oh, well, that's a slur. No, it was not intended as a slur. It was not created as a slur. It's just to refer to people who aren't trans. Okay? So if you're cisgender, Ellen DeGeneres is a cisgender lesbian. So identified as female, assigned female at birth. She identifies as female. She's attracted to Portia, another female. So you can see how sexual orientation and gender identity are two different things. Can you be transgender and gay? Yes, you can. Met a lovely couple recently.
Keep in mind that if somebody transitions from male to female and they date a female, it doesn't mean they're straight. It means they're gay or lesbian, however they identify, but meaning they have same-sex attraction. And the same with the opposite direction. If somebody transitions from female to male and they date a female, they'd be considered straight.
Mm-hmm. Queer. I'm careful with the Q word when I'm working with people 60 and older because I still see the eye tighten, the shoulder goes up, there's that little flinch. They still hear the echoes of their own youth when they heard it as a slur thrown at them before they got jumped or attacked or arrested. So I tend to stay away from the Q word when I'm speaking with elders, although I identify very comfortably as queer myself. Certainly our young people use the word in a very different way, and the elders understand that queer was desperately and deliberately reclaimed in the depths of the AIDS crisis, when shock tactics meant survival, meant conversation, meant the government would be forced to really do something about that pandemic. But the young people use it as an all-inclusive umbrella term. They're like, think you're not cisgender, think you're not heterosexual, come on over under the queer umbrella. And so we've had some really interesting intergenerational conversations around that.
And when using the word queer, what I tell police officers when I'm talking is, if somebody uses the term queer to identify themselves, then that's cool, that's all right.
Absolutely.
But when you're dealing with certain segments of the population, sometimes queer was a word that they got smacked around to or assaulted, and that behavior makes them very nervous, can create anxiety when the term is being directed to them. So you always have to have the reader in mind when you do this. If they're using queer to identify, then just go with queer, that's fine, but only use it if they use it as a way of identifying.
100% agree. And Janelle Monáe has worked really hard over the past few years to just really rise as they is a queer Black artist. And they find such power in that statement. So if you don't like labels, or you don't know what your labels are, or you're not sure, or you're questioning, this is the flag for you. This is the unlabeled pride flag. I love that they made this. And you can just come on over here, another big umbrella term, everybody's welcome. I'm gonna put JoJo Siwa here. She just passed her 1-year anniversary of coming out, and she's leaning toward now identifying as gay, but she's still finding her words, so I had her under the unlabeled flag for the past year. Sofas, I love this word. Sofas are significant others, friends, family, and allies. Look at all these lovely sofas here with me today. How was your day? I found out I'm a sofa. You think that? We're finding more and more, as science reveals more of the great mystery, that gender is a spectrum, not a binary. And fully half of Gen Z sees it that way. They're like, oh yeah, totally. I'm kind of running to catch up. I was still taught line up boys and girls in the kindergarten line. But there are a lot of ways to move through the world comfortably as your best authentic self. Remember, this slide is about gender, not sexual orientation. So yes, you're right, there are some straight allies on this slide. And there's all this room. And some people are sort of holding their own space. This person is agender, does not really have a sense of themselves as male or female. It's kind of like, well, there's a lot going on out there in the great grand parade of gender. That's interesting, but that, yeah, it doesn't really resonate with me. Back to Janelle Monáe. Janelle, like me, identifies as non-binary, outside that traditional gender binary. And you'll see NB as a term as well, for short. They also identify as pansexual, a word that you used earlier. And same thing, they are attracted to hearts, not parts. They're attracted to someone regardless of gender. Incidentally, pans don't come out of the closet, they fall out of the kitchen cupboards.
Just keep in mind that when people are non-binary, you really have to take that effort to respect that space they're in. And if you don't do terms like, do you know what this means? People who are non-binary spend a lot of time thinking about how they are and who they are. So try to respect their space and try to learn from them and try to be a good ally to these folks.
Thank you. And, you know, I fit under the trans umbrella as someone who's non-binary, but I don't necessarily identify as trans. I think there are situations where I can be included under that term, but not always. So as Sharon says, just listen to the space the person is trying to create and help them build that forth. This 100% would have been little me. I wish I'd had these words when I was 7, 12, 16, 25. 35 would have been nice. I'm a bit of a late bloomer for a lot of reasons, even though I knew in high school that I wasn't on the script that a lot of my friends were. And some folks don't have a fixed sense of gender. It's more like the bubble in the spirit level. It moves around, and this is also my experience of gender. It always has been. Sometimes I don't even notice. I go to tidy up and I look in the mirror, it's like, oh, it's there now. Okay. And I'm very cool with it. I've always gotten people on the street addressing me with any and all pronouns, and it ticked me off no end when I was trying to be a good little girl because that's all I was supposed to be. And then I just grew into it, and now I'm very cool with it. It's like, oh, I guess that's my vibe now. The genderqueer folks tend to be a bit more forthright about it. They will hold it in that identity forth in their dress and their expression. They're often activists, poets, artists, just pushing that spectrum forth, pushing against that old gender binary that isn't big enough for everybody. I get this question a lot, exactly like this. What's the difference between drag and transgender? Okay. So drag is a performance. It's something that you've created and put on. It's exaggerated, whether you're a comedy queen or a pageant queen like RuPaul and you look like you breezed off the cover of Vogue, but it's too very. And it's also something that all of these people take off at the end of the show. And they go to bed as themselves, not as the character. Folks who are transgender are who they are 24/7. They're telling you who they authentically are. But we find some confusion in the general public. A lot of it comes from cisgender actors who are really great actors winning Oscars and Emmys for playing trans roles, but there's a little confusion out there in the viewing public, like, oh, well, that's a thing that they put on and take off. No, this is an authenticity. This is a performance. And if you have a trans person who does drag, again, the drag is the performance, all comes up at the end of the night, and she or he or they will go to bed as who they truly are.
Well said, and just keep in mind that to really emphasize that somebody has done drag doesn't mean they're not trans. It just means that they may be doing that as a part of discovery, expression. I knew a trans woman who did male drag, and it was a way of just, she felt like she identified as she just felt like this was a way of just kind of opening up people's eyes to educate in a fun way.
Yeah, and that's the immense power of drag is drag makes fun of everything. It's like Bugs Bunny, right? It can break any wall and say, hey, why do we do this as a society? And could we do a little better? Yeah, I think maybe we could. It's a fascinating art form. Which brings us round to pronouns. So sometimes you are sure of what pronoun, or you're pretty sure. As we all go through our daily lives, we're accustomed to it. Our brain exists to help us make judgments and make assumptions, but you want to question them. Sometimes it's obvious. If you have Sir Anne McKellen, he's always a sir because he was the first out and proud gay man to be a knight of the realm. But for other folks, you may not be as certain, especially as our younger friends are coming into the workforce. I've got non-binary friends at work. I've got gender fluid friends at work. So you can ask, what are your pronouns? I would ask that to a younger person. And about 6 years ago, we could say, what are your preferred pronouns? And that was correct and very polite. And then Gen Z came up and said, oh, hold on. I don't prefer these pronouns. I'm telling you who I am. Fair point. What are your pronouns? Often they'll have a pin or a badge, which might also tell you a little bit more about who they are and what they enjoy. Mine has role-playing dice. I'm touching the mic, I'm sorry. If you have an older person, you're not quite comfortable asking that, you say, how would you like me to address you? This also works if people have come together to the senior center or your office. How would you like me to address you in relation to Phil? Oh, I'm his driver, neighbor, friend, spouse. You see, again, we're back to opening space with your language for people to speak more honestly and communicate better with you, and for you to communicate better with them. And as we've talked, there are a lot of different terms that are being created every day on the internet. And they, them is indeed now a singular. At Bay Path Elder Services, we encourage people to put their pronouns on their Zoom screen or in their email. We don't require it because, for all I know, I've got at least one colleague who is questioning on their own journey. Maybe will be coming out as trans, non-binary, I don't know. But I don't want to burden that person with the wrong pronoun 40 times a day. They don't need to look at that. Similarly, if I'm working with an elder who hasn't had an opportunity to do a legal name change, because there's barriers to that, right? Money, time, transportation, just to name a few. So I don't have to bring that name forward. I can say, on these documents, please, they need you to sign your full legal name. She knows it, I know it, but I don't need to voice it and bring it into her day any more than this. A lot of it, as you can see, is kind of going with the vibe of the person, listening carefully, and affirming them with your language.
When you're dealing with, like, for law enforcement, we have to document by legal name, and it's a tough situation when we're dealing with binary and non-binary folks. What we try to do is we will try to document it however the person chooses to have it documented, but we'll always try to use their preferred name, and a preferred name is however they choose to be addressed, to try to make them feel more comfortable. That's the goal that we have.
Just so. And on our intake forms at Bay Path, we do the same thing. We have MFX gender or prefer not to say options. We have first name, last name, please call me. So it could be Mike Smith, please call me Mickey, and that's in big letters. Or it could be Mike Smith, please call me Michelle. But I know going in to talk with this person who they are, how they would like me to address them. Someone asked earlier for tips and tricks if it's they. That's what started this whole talk, was grandparents trying to get a grasp of using they for a grandchild who'd come out as non-binary. Often they'll have a badge. You can add space for pronouns on your hello badges. You can set an example, create that space by using your pronouns on your badge, your Zoom screen. When you meet someone, hi, I'm Julie, my pronouns are she, they. So in the case of one that's split like mine, think of it like going to Montreal, where they greet you in the shops, hello, bonjour, bonjour, hello. The first one is where the person generally feels more comfortable. So I feel like I fall more on the feminine or femme side of things, especially with my uncut, flowing pandemic tresses, but I'm very comfortable with they. Some people will invite you to ask. To get used to using they, especially as a singular, people have come up with a lot of great ideas. I know one agency over at Friendship Works, they had everybody bring a stuffed animal and introduce the stuffed animal as their friend who uses they, them pronouns. And they went through the day with that, just to get the flow of it. One dad could not get the hang of they for several weeks, and then one day got it right all day. And the child said, Dad, you did it! I've been they all day! Thank you! What changed? He said, I'm imagining a mouse in your pocket. Now there are two of you and you're a they. And I know that's not how it works, but it will get me to they, and then I will fall into the habit. And it worked. Go ahead.
And when you make them misgender somebody, don't be afraid to apologize, but don't over-apologize.
Yes.
Folks that are dealing with this, they deal with this on a daily basis. Julie said, they get tired sometimes. Sometimes they're not going to want to explain to you how they feel or whether they feel, because it's not their job to educate you. But the thing is if you make a mistake, just say, I'm sorry, I'm working on it. I work in the community, and I've been involved in the community for a long, long time. Occasionally I make mistakes. I try to be respectful, and I do my best to try to get it correct every time if I can.
Nicely said, and that's exactly right. I'm sorry, I meant to say he. I'm sorry, I meant Steve. If they get a little more upset, obviously you would be meet them at that level, but Right, you don't have to break the whole conversation. I'm so sorry! Because then that just makes the moment bigger and heavier. This one I loved. This was friend A came out as trans. Friend B kept goofing up the pronouns. So friend B came over one day with the misgender corrector, handed it to friend A and said, when I get the pronoun wrong, squirt me. It worked on the cat. And it did work. And I love how playful that is with those two friends. They're working together and they're communicating in this striking way to help both of them get into the habit. I have a dear friend who came out as trans recently, staring at the Zoom screen thinking, you know, I'm not seeing a man there. I'm a woman. And sometimes she gets the pronouns wrong and sometimes we get the pronouns wrong. And we're old friends, we can laugh about it and continue. So as you say, you can just be respectful and continue on. You have to break open the whole conversation. I will note a whole lot of people, well, really every one of us, we're all coming back from this pandemic isolation with a fresh authenticity. Whether you discovered you love to bake, you love to go out in the great outdoors and you fell in love with nature, you picked up your art supplies, or you realized you're trans, or that you're a lesbian, or that you're maybe interested in both boys and girls. I have lost track of how many people I know personally who have moved over a letter, added a letter or two. It's a really exciting time to really, we've had this global grand pause to spend time with ourselves in a way that we really weren't encouraged to before. And I think that's really exciting, a little scary, sure, but it's going to be a great time to move forward together and reintroduce ourselves to one another more authentically as we move into whatever the new normal is as COVID subsides. Conversation, of course, is the best way. If people aren't getting it and they're resistant, you can use a bell of mindfulness. If they misgender you, just ring the bell to remind them. Use a kazoo if you want to have some fun, or a vuvuzela. And there was one person on Twitter who had had enough and went to Thanksgiving dinner with an air horn, which apparently stopped the misgendering in 20 minutes flat. This is new. I encourage everybody to bring it into their senior centers. PFLAG, Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, which is a grassroots support group all over the world, certainly across the states, for families with LGBTQ+ and questioning loved ones. They teamed up with SAGE, Services and Advocacy for Gay and Lesbian Elders, or GLBT elders, and they've come up with this great new pamphlet, which you can also download online.
And keep in mind, when the LGBTQIA+ person comes out, the family comes out also. In
Yes.
some families, especially a trans person comes out as trans, the significant other may go in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
They may get really fearful of people knowing. And that's something you always got to keep in mind, that if you know somebody who is dealing with this at this point in their life and the struggle, be careful, mindful that they may share it with you, but they may not want the world to know.
Mm-hmm.
So you really got to kind of gauge where they are. And when people come out with a different family member, that any part of the LGBTQ world, don't assume just because it's gay, lesbian, that's easier today, because in some populations, I've dealt with folks that come out gay and they're devastated that people found out, either they got outed. You have to talk to them a lot. It's still a big deal in some worlds, coming out any part of the rainbow colors.
Yes, indeed. And particularly my elders, but also the high school students that we work with. We have an intergenerational rainbow community meal site, the Pathways Cafe. You're all invited. Hopefully we'll be back in person next month at the Assabet Valley Regional Technical High School. And we have everybody from students to elders gathered to talk and share a free full meal. And you know, we've got these kids' backs and we've got these elders' backs, that they want to be out in this space, great. If they don't want to self-identify, they just want to come and say, I'm here for the food, but they're digging the vibe, great. Just, I'm always trying to protect them and move with them, not before them, not against them.
And when we're working with these populations, we always got to remember these populations are not weak populations, they're very strong. But some days they get tired of the struggle.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. And my father always taught me, do not ever judge somebody until you know how far they've traveled and what they have to deal with on a daily basis. Like people who have health problems. They start the day with a set of challenges that you and me don't even start with. So just keep that in mind and try to be kind to each other.
Yeah. At the end of the day and all day and every way, be kind. Amen to that. And that's how you make yourself into a great ally. And allies come from everywhere. As I said, our rainbow community has always been here, all around the world, in every space, and we're seeing them more, and we're hearing from them more, and it's a really exciting time to see everybody blooming. And we were talking earlier about how we work with a lot of late bloomers who've come out after perhaps a spouse has passed, and they're going to move into a new phase of their life. It's not a phase, they've just been waiting. They're moving into a new space of who they authentically are. Sometimes they'll wait till the kids are grown and flown. Say, family, I have something to share with you.
And sometimes they stay with their significant others.
Yes.
And they acknowledge that this part of them. Just because you're part of an LGBTQ and you're in a straight relationship doesn't mean that you're not in love. It just might mean that you have a capacity to love somebody else. But that doesn't always mean that you're going to leave the relationship. And that's something people have to keep in mind, that people become family the longer you are with a group of people. And talking about families in the LGBTQIA plus world is a lot of times people are still being disowned by their families, so they create their own families within the community. And that's something you have to realize, that why these folks have such tight ties within the community, because sometimes they were thrown out by their parents and loved ones, and they had to start a new family and new traditions.
Beautifully said. And so you'll see what's called not a biological family, but a logical family, a chosen family, a found family. And you'll find out, and this is why we changed our language up at Bay Path. You know, are you married? Do you have kids? Oh, this can be loaded questions. Who are the important people in your life? Tell me about why they are so important to you. How do they support you? Who are they? You can get a much clearer picture of who this person is and who their family are. Do remember, if necessary, to check for medical proxies and emergency contacts, because sometimes they haven't thought of that yet. So I'm always checking with my elders, particularly with the pandemic, hopefully abating, but still ongoing. It's quite common for younger adults, especially college students, to come out at a large family gathering, whether it was on Zoom or in person this year. Got the whole family together, hey, I have some news to share here at Thanksgiving. And so we get a lot of calls to PFLAG following the holidays. You can download all their pamphlets. There are some wonderful groups around here. I'm always happy to take calls and questions. There's no cost. I'm happy to find and learn the answers alongside you. I by no means know everything. We're all always learning. All of these hotlines have gone 24/7 since the pandemic broke out, because the call volume skyrocketed with people who were isolating with family that didn't know, didn't understand, maybe didn't approve. So there are all these different groups to call. And I have a lot of my elders who are doing weekly check-ins with a peer on the Sage Elders Hotline, and that's been good for people on both sides of the line.
Yes, keep in mind that the pandemic has made people be forced to be within the communities. They don't have that time to be out and be with the authentic self. Like
Yes.
if somebody's living part-time as a trans woman, during this pandemic, they may have not been able to go out and socialize with their true self.
Yes.
And the stress level just compiled onto this pandemic of fear, sicknesses, and not being able to interact with people that identify how you identify.
Yes, indeed. And there's a phenomenon that's often called queer space, all one word. And I myself am very hungry for queer space, even with the job that I do, just to get together in community, take that breath and let it out and be, just be as I am. That's That's what people are hungry for. And I know all of us are hungry for that in different ways with this isolation, but particularly for our rainbow community. And there's no timeline for coming out. Wherever you are, however you are, wherever you are in your journey, we're here, we're listening, and we love you. You are welcome to contact me for help finding info, support, or resources.
Right, and then part of my job is, one of the reasons I go to the outskirts of communities is, even though I'm a Worcester police officer, LGBTQI plus people have a habit of really not doing things within their own community, especially the level of how open they are. They have a tendency to move out to the outer perimeters. And sometimes with this connection I have with the community, I can hear about issues in other communities, and I'll always reach out to those agencies to let them know if they have an issue. And I try to work with other agencies to, because there's not a lot of communities that have LGBTQI plus police officers, I try to make sure that I'm available to those communities, because we're not just Worcester people, we're people from the United States. And I've dealt with questions all the way from California.
Wow.
Conversations. Law enforcement is coming along. We're trying to be better. My chief, I have to thank Steve Sargent for encouraging me to always speak when we can, and City Manager Ed Augustus, those are the two people that appointed me. And I'm really trying to create a conversation in very conservative spaces, so people, because we do have people in conservative worlds who can be LGBTQI plus and have family members that they're struggling with, and they can be afraid to ask questions. So with being a police officer, I work within these communities. They feel more comfortable talking to me.
Nice. Thank you for your time, your attention. I genuinely, deeply thank each and every one of you for being here today and for watching. For those of you at home, stay warm and snug and safe. You're always welcome to ask questions. I know I had a gazillion questions when I was coming out and didn't know whom to ask or where to go or even what the questions were. And that's what I try to do, is help people find their own answers now. Thank you very much. Questions are always warmly welcome. And this has been a great start to the day for all of us. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sharon.